started, shall we? Good evening, folks. Thanks for coming in. Welcome to our last show of this very, very fine week. So tonight we have Tracey back with us. But before we tell you about tonight's show, she's going to explain why we're wearing these on our heads.
Well, I thought as we were going to do our last chat show about the two queens of Henry VIII, the last two wives, it would be quite apt to wear a crown each. So I ordered these for us, didn't I, Scott? And when they came, we didn't realise they were for children. So mine is perched on top of my head, and I think yours is taped to your head, isn't it?
I wasn't telling anybody that.
Oh, well, either that, you've got a very small head.
When I've just actually noticed the two crowns are different.
Yeah, they are. You've got the king, you see, and I've got the queen.
I just actually noticed they're two different. So when it arrived in the post, I tried it on and it broke, basically. So I didn't worry what Tracey doing, because she spent an absolute fortune on these.
Real gold, real jewels.
She's eating beans and she's going to be eating beans and sawdust for a month now because she's skint, basically. So, since Tracey's told you, I thought, well, how can I make this work now? So I've actually got white medical tape stuck to the back of my head holding this on. Cheers for that, Tracey, for
anytime.
grassing me in, do you know what I mean?
I'll give your secrets away, don't you worry.
Aye, cheers for that. There's our Laura in. Good evening, looking fabulous in your crown. Both. I know, dear. Thank you. I can't say anything for Tracey, but I know I'll make this look good. At least a pair of horns in it. Beep, beep.
Oh dear.
Anyway, it's Laura's birthday tomorrow as well. By the way.
Happy birthday, Laura, for tomorrow. Have a lovely day.
I'm not telling you what age she is because I can't remember.
Oh, she'll be a spring chicken, no doubt.
Oh, definitely. Still a youngster. Still a youngster at heart. Anyway, will we stop talking dribble and go on with it? What do you think?
Yeah, why not?
Aye, that's why we're here after all, isn't it?
Yeah. So we've been doing our series, haven't we, on the Tudors? So we've done an episode on Henry, and we've done an episode on the first two wives, Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn. And then we did an episode on his second two wives, Jane Seymour and Anne of Cleves. So tonight we're going to be talking about Catherine Howard and Catherine Parr, his last two wives. Hence why we're wearing the crowns, because it's a bit sad, really, isn't it? Because we're talking about the last two queens, the last two wives. So
I know, it's the end of an era.
Yeah,
absolutely. Kind of thing, maybe. It's not the last show in the Tudors, by the way, folks. Tracey just likes being dramatic, drama queen. Basically, after tonight, we are going to be covering behind the scenes with Henry, like Cromwell, Thomas More, Wolsey, people like that, people who had big influences and you can say it.
That was easy for you to say. Influences on him.
That's the one. Influences on Henry behind the scenes who, we're only after the word. They were only in it for their own personal gain. But that's still to come. We will be covering all these vagabonds, shall we say.
Yeah. It's Privy Council that were trying to work their way up all the time, weren't they? By stabbing each other in the back.
Aye, and pretending to be loyal to the king and stuff like that. Well, meantime, as you say, they're all, consorting in corners and stuff like that. But tonight we are going to be talking about wife number 5 and wife number 6, Catherine Howard. Now, we might get some of our facts and figures wrong. If we do apologise for it. That's a wee disclaimer. That's a wee disclaimer thrown in there,
Yeah, it's very
we are not experts, But you know how sometimes you do a show and you get a couple of dates wrong and then somebody mails you or whatever, a comment, I read a comment the other day. I had Neil Packer on last week. And their comment came through a couple of days ago, just says rubbish. It's from an individual who, I don't know, why do you call that show rubbish?
How rude.
How rude indeed.
How rude. Nick Packer's lovely. He does such a lot for the paranormal world.
Yes, he's a fan. That was the first time I'd had him on the show. He is coming back, but he's a really down-to-earth guy and what have you.
Yeah,
but this, sorry, Laura, this cabbage, he caused quite a bit of this. I had a run-in with him before, months and months ago. We will get to Catherine Howard, folks. Don't worry. We will get there. And I made a comment on one of his posts one day. An innocent comment, you know. Yeah. And he started saying that our group was rubbish and, you know, we're all, what did he cause? Snowflakes or something. And we were all faking. So I just basically went down the guy's throat. I thought, you know, you can slag me, but don't slag your team, your group, where you don't even know.
Exactly.
But he disappeared for a wee while. But now he seems to have resurfaced.
Right.
He's got the initials RC.
Right, okay.
I don't know if you've heard of him.
No, I don't think so.
His first name is the same name as a very famous king who was found in a car park.
Oh, right, okay.
You know.
Yeah.
And his second name is something you use to take on holiday.
Oh.
You put your luggage in it.
Yeah, no, I don't know that name. I will look out for them.
Oh, the guy's off his trolley. He appeared with James Wales once on TV, so he thinks he's a big TV celeb, and he just rips the paranormal to bits. He really thinks he is, you know, a ticket, but he's really just a plonker. End of story. And no doubt, I'm saying this for his benefit in case he does watch this, because he watched the Neil Packer one, so chances are he might watch this one. I hope so, because the guy's just a nobody who's trying to get attention, and it's never going to happen. He's got a quiff. You might see, not that I can talk about hairdos, but by God, excuse the French, his hair goes up with that and it's in a quick back, you know, and the poses. Oh, do you know what I mean? He's one of these cabbages that should be planted in a field and left. Right? there's my other half in, loving the crown, guys. Hey, I know we make these look good. No, that way.
I can't move. I have to sort of move like that because it might fall off.
Well, you see, you should have did where you grasped me in for tape it to your head.
I could have taped it to my hair, couldn't I?
Then you can go with that and it stays put. My specs might come flying up, but my crown will stay on.
If you can hear funny noises, by the way, my dog is in my room with me and he's just wandering about at the moment, so he'll probably settle in a bit.
So if it farts, it's no you then?
It's not me. It's little Bertie boy.
Well, see, how do we know the dogs? I don't want you to hold them up or anything, you know, make them burp. I was going to say burp, make them bark.
No, he'll settle down in a minute. Normally when I'm in this Zen room, I'm normally doing a reading or something like that. He'll always just be flat out with the energy. But because we're talking, obviously, tonight, and he can hear your strong Scottish accent, he's like, what's going on?
He's thinking, you know.
Who the hell is that?
He sounds like a pretty awesome guy. I can say hello tonight. I'm not next to Scott in the living room. She's usually sat over there on the couch that she's in.
So we've got no IT support tonight, Sarah, if it goes wrong.
It's not going to go wrong. Trust me, it's not going to go wrong. You unplug it through the wall for 2 minutes and plug it back in.
That normally does the trick, doesn't it?
There was one time when Sarah, I think it was Sarah will keep me right on this. I think it was the computer was going wonky or something. But Sarah, she has a bit of a wizard with all that kind of stuff, but she couldn't fix it. So I unplugged it through the wall and then plugged it back in a minute or two later, and it fixed the problem.
It's a miracle. What would you do without him, Sarah?
Magic touch, Midas touch.
Oh dear.
Hey, young man, well done on your B thing for Craig's doing courses in college and you get a B. Because I call them exams. I know they're no exams, but I'm only a room away. I fake tan tonight, so can't sit on sofa in case I stain it. She's covered in
bless her.
Yeah, but it's that kind of stuff, you know, you go to bed. I don't wear it, obviously, you know.
No, you're just naturally red.
I just wear a natural straw. Are they like quite red, actually, don't I?
You're looking very sun-kissed. You really are.
I'm looking pretty awesome, actually, I think.
Well, I had to make do tonight. John Azuno was busy with Halle Berry, I understand. So, I've had to make
Aye,
do
folks, wait to
tonight.
tell you this. Tracey fancies John Ozuna. There. You grass me in for taking the crown to my head. I'm grassing in for that. I mean,
he seemed a very nice guy.
He is. The Mad King of Scotland.
I enjoyed watching the chat with him.
Well, as I say, I'll put a word in for you, Tracey. I don't know if I can't make any promises,
Well, we've got Halle Berry on the scene soon, hasn't he? So, I don't think I stand much chance, really. So let's face it.
You might have a wee bit of competition there.
I think.
But your accent might sway the deal for you.
Yeah, the Americans like a British accent, don't they?
No, they like the Scottish accent. Get this right, they like the Scottish accent. The English accent, no offence, but most of the Americans I've spoke to, they say, "Oh, I love your Scottish accent. Can't wait to do the show because can't wait to hear your accent." Blah blah blah. So I know you're jealous. Jealousy is ripping out you. I can see that.
They're okay. They're okay if you've got an interpreter, and then they can work out what you're saying, can't they?
Well, actually, no, not another. Oh no! I start again. Oh, not another one. So does Laura. Haha. So does Laura. What?
Yeah, you'll have to read them out because my screen is so small tonight. I don't know why you're in the middle of it, but I can see the things coming up, but I can't read them. They're tiny.
Craig says the Mad King of Scotland. It wasn't Scotland, it was Scotland. He meant. But no, a lot of people like the Scottish accent.
I like.
Oh, right, aye. Let's just talk about that. Can you read that one?
I can't read that one now.
Fancy John, LOL.
What? Say what? I've gone deaf as well as blind.
You're not the only one that fancies John. Sarah put the comment up. Oh no, not another one. So does Laura.
Does she?
She.
Oh. Well, Laura can have him tomorrow for her birthday.
We better not say that because see this guy here, that's Laura's husband.
Oh dear, sorry.
You really need to get with the programme, Tracey.
I need to get with the programme. I think we ought to talk about the Queens, don't you?
Aye, I think you better moving along quite slow.
Moving on.
Aye. So as I say, we're talking about wife number 5 and number 6. So Catherine Howard, far as we know, she was born around between 1518 and 1524. She was a member of the Howard family. She was actually, I found this quite surprising, she was actually first cousin to Anne Boleyn.
That's right, yeah, she was.
Because I think it was on her father's side. Her father was Anne's mother's brother.
Yeah.
I think I've got that right.
I think so. Either that or the fathers were brothers. But either way, they were first cousins anyway.
So she was related to Anne Boleyn.
Yeah.
I think that everybody's related back in the days, weren't they?
Yeah, we're probably related to her in some way.
Aye, way down the line.
Yeah.
She was also related to Jane Seymour, which I didn't know because her gran was the sister of Jane's gran.
Okay, so she was the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk, wasn't she? The gran.
Mm-hmm.
She was the step gran, actually. Because when Catherine was very young, and it was quite common apparently, that even if you came from a well-to-do family and quite rich family, you were very often looked after by the grandparents. So Catherine, when she was young, went to the household of the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk. And it was a bit of a lax house, wasn't it, from what we understand? So she had lots of children under her care, but both boys and girls. And I think the girls were slightly taken advantage of because this lady would have lots of male visitors to the house. And I feel like the girls were kind of offered to the men. There were no kind of rules or regulations. And of course, the girls were quite naive. They didn't know any different. So they were happy to be flirty and, with these men, weren't they? And maybe more, who knows? So I think it was a bit of a different upbringing for Catherine, because she was very young, very naive, wasn't brought up with her parents, was brought up with a stepmother who was, she didn't really give her much sort of tuition or education or good standing. I think Catherine's education was quite simple, quite naive. She would have learnt dancing. She would have learnt. Sorry about that.
All right, so we know the dog is in the room.
The dog is in the room. She would have learnt dancing, music. She did become a lady in waiting to Anne of Cleves. So this is how she came into court, and this is how she caught not only Henry VIII's attention, but quite a few men's attention, because she was very young, very pretty, very lively, very funny, very flirty. So she was very popular. She was a little bit different to the other ladies in court, because she was very sort of relaxed about things. She didn't really know the etiquette of court, but because she was so attractive and sort of likable, people kind of forgave her for that. It didn't matter.
She got away with it.
She got away with it, absolutely. There was a miniature painting of her by our friend again, who we've mentioned several times, Hans Holbein Jr., and it depicted a lady in a French hood, and it was thought to be Catherine Howard. And as we know, a lot of the paintings were done after the person's life, so it wasn't necessarily a true likeness. But she said she was said to be very dainty, very petite, very pretty. Her character was charming. She was lively, attractive. And Henry really, really warmed to her straight away, because obviously he'd had the relationship with Anne of Cleves, which only lasted 6 months. If you go back to our previous chat, we will be able to learn about that. But they got annulled after 6 months. And because Catherine was already on the scene, I think even Anne of Cleves was paramount in pushing her in front of Henry, because he was still really, truly mourning the death of Jane Seymour. And Anne of Cleves hadn't filled that gap, although later on in life they became very good friends. But Catherine Howard just really started to lift his spirits. And she was actually known as the Rose Without a Thorn by Henry. So she was a very, very charming character to be around. And I think, like I said, Anne of Cleves pushed her in front of Henry because she really thought a lot of Henry. She wanted him to be happy, and she really thought that she would be good for him, because she was so naive and different to the other wives who'd been quite intelligent and very politically outspoken. And Catherine really wasn't like this at all. So at age 17, when Henry was in his late 40s by this time, they got married on the 28th of July in 1540. So, and she was said her great achievement really was to really lift Henry's spirits and to make him happy again, because he was so enamored by her childlike behavior and by her naivety, because that is how she was. She didn't know any different or know any better. And also she was still very, very young when she first came to court. So she was really paramount in lifting him, making him happier, helping him to get over his mourning of Jane Seymour, and also the disappointment of being married to Anne of Cleves. So it was quite an interesting marriage, quite an interesting arrangement. I don't think many of the Privy Council really agreed with it, because they didn't think that she was, very suitable or an appropriate lady to be a queen, or an appropriate girl to be a queen. So she was quite different. All of Henry's wives seem to have been quite different up until now. But she really, really was. And she was so much younger than him. And I mean, she wouldn't have been attracted to him, because by this time he was already big. He already had the issues with his leg, didn't he? He had the terrible problem with the pus coming out of his leg, which was just horrendous and just must have smelled awful. So it must have been, I don't know, mixed feelings for her maybe, because she was excited to be elevated to this high position, but then she was also with a man that she would not have fancied, she would not have loved. And of course, as we know, Thomas Culpeper was one of the sort of close king's aides, as it were, and they caught each other's eye, didn't they? So Catherine Howard and Thomas Culpeper formed a kind of a secret friendship, really. But Culpeper was a very attractive man. Lots of the ladies in waiting were attracted to him. Lady Rochester, who was George Boleyn's widow, was a lady in waiting, and she kind of encouraged the relationship with Catherine Howard and Culpeper. So they had a lot of secret meetings, a lot of secret liaisons, and it became quite dangerous. But to her, it was a bit of a game. She was so naive that I don't think she realised how dangerous a game that she was playing. And Culpeper as well, because he was only young himself, wasn't he? And he was so the king. So
with Catherine Howard, she was just jumping back to her youth and when she was brought up. You know, there were the stories about her music teacher, Henry Monarchs.
Yes.
The things had been on there. I don't know if that was ever actually proved or not, but, you know, there's certainly plenty of... I keep disappearing. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change the background in this 2 seconds. Because for some reason... There we go.
Yeah, we can see you now. Yeah, you did keep disappearing.
So I was starting to annoy me because I was here and then I wasn't here. So there you go. That's where the loose we took the background. That's our kitchen and that's our dining area.
Yeah.
And our living room's over there. It's a big, huge, big room. So there was a story about Henry Mannix, some music teacher that he had his way with on several occasions. But none of them was actually true. And then when she was around about 14, Frances Derham, I can't remember it. Derham came on the scene.
Yeah.
And he took quite a liking to her as well.
Yeah.
And I think they took kind of advantage of her naivety.
Yeah, because it was all before she even came to court, when she was, you know, with Mannix and with Derham. She had met them at this house of almost ill repute, really, when you think about it, with this Dowager Duchess that ran this sort of very lax household. So she had already encountered them. They were kind of from her past. Henry VIII wasn't aware of her past. And in fact, a lot of people from court weren't aware of her past either. It was only when... as things always seem to, things started to turn a bit sour, that people started to do their research, their investigations, but also probably making up a lot of lies like they did for Anne Boleyn and the downfall of Anne Boleyn. Because, you know, like you said, Henry Mannix, Frances Derham, Thomas Culpeper, they were basically all accused eventually of adultery with Catherine Howard. And for her, because she was queen at the time, it was high treason. So we know where this is going to go, don't we? At the end of the day, we know where this is going to go. She was condemned to death, along with Lady Rochester, which is really sad, because in some ways I feel very sorry for Lady Rochester, because she was forced to marry George Boleyn. And there was a question over George Boleyn, wasn't there, as to whether he was gay or whether he wasn't. So she never truly felt loved or treated well by George Boleyn. But he was beheaded. So although they didn't have a close marriage, I think that was quite traumatic for her. She remained in court. This is Lady Rochester we're talking about. She remained in court. So she witnessed all of these awful politics, all of these awful underhand things that were going on. And she always managed to keep out of it in a way. She was always slightly in the background. But that changed when Catherine Howard was on the scene, because they became quite close and quite friendly. And as I say, Lady Rochester encouraged the relationship with Culpeper, because, to be honest, she probably liked him herself. She probably liked spending time with him and seeing him. So unfortunately, you know, she was condemned along with Catherine as well. So... on the 13th of Feb, at age 19, she was beheaded. She was executed at the Tower of London, which is terribly sad. I mean, her achievements really were the fact that, she lifted Henry's spirits, but she was actually only with him for 18 months. And she was so young and so innocent. And it's another really tragedy, isn't it, when you think about it, that she was set up.
It is quite tragic, you know. For Tuesday, we've got a lamp right beside me, and even though it looks bright here, it's actually quite dull. Got two. I'm not disappearing. I'm right here. You still really see my hand. See, look, see my hand there. Look, see. That's a bit better. It's just got a hell of a dull in here. I mean,
yeah,
you feel sorry for Catherine Howard. You know, with the start that she had, because her mum passed when she was very young.
Yeah.
So she was brought up by her father's stepmom, something like that. So her father never actually brought her up. And then of course she's thrown into care and stuff like that, and then you get monarchs, you've got Durham as well. And it was actually her uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, who I think initially introduced her to court.
Okay. Yeah.
I might be wrong, but I think it was him that initially, and then Anna Cleese was, she was still kicking about basically, and she was getting pushing. So you've got this young girl, maybe 15, 16 years old. Not the brightest bulb in the box, no disrespect to her. No real intelligent compared to the previous wives,
Yeah.
She's suddenly at court, she's got Henry in front of her, this big guy. She probably didn't like him, probably didn't fancy him, but at the end of the day, he was the king.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And nobody would dare say no to the king, whether it be, money or marriage, whatever the king, you said yes to the king, and that was it. And so I think she would have get married through fear as well.
Yeah, she probably didn't have a choice at all, did she?
No, but then, this is just my opinion, so she's get married, she's not got a clue what's going on, but she's married the king. They actually get married the same day as Cromwell was executed.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
So he was losing his head, and old Henry was getting another wife, basically. It just shows you what kind of weird times it was back then anyway.
No,
but I think after, she's married to the king, so she's a kind of queen consort, whatever she was called. And how can you put it? I think the whole queen thing took over. Suddenly she's the queen. She's got, ladies in waiting, everybody's calling her Your Majesty, blah, blah, blah. And she loved it.
Yeah.
But then the big pebble lands in the pond. And I wrote it down what year he turned up. Francis Durham shows up at court.
Yeah.
And I think she would get the shock of her life when he turned up.
Because she knew her past would start to be exposed, didn't she?
But I mean, she showed. The other thing was it's said that she showed very, very little interest in her stepchildren, basically, who would have been Mary and Elizabeth.
They didn't like her at all, did they?
Edward. No, Mary despised her.
Absolutely good word. She certainly did, yeah.
Because of her value, Mary's virtue, values, whatever, and her religious beliefs, and all of a sudden this young girl, way younger than Mary, is married to her dad. I know Henry didn't really have a lot of contact with him himself, but Catherine made kind of no effort,
Yeah, that's it.
So, so she's there, she's enjoying the luxury of being queen, basically, and then Durham shows up. This is probably the last guy she ever expected to see at court.
And he was a real troublemaker as well, wasn't he?
He was wanting to stir the pot. He started, he was quite loose in the mouth.
Yeah.
And, once rumours started, she didn't do herself any favours with Culpeper.
No, but then she was young, wasn't she? She was young and he was attractive. So, it's so difficult. She didn't realise the implications, I don't think, did she, because of her naivety.
She got carried away. And she'd only been married like 3-4 months before Durham showed up.
Yeah.
And I think he had kind of blagged his way into the position.
Yeah,
because he wanted near Catherine.
Yeah.
So you've got Culpeper here, you've got Derham there, and you've got Catherine in the middle. And Derham's jealous of Culpeper because obviously he's carrying on with the Queen, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that's when trouble started.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. When he started, dropping the odd pebble in the pond. And then I think Henry got told in a letter, I think he received a letter or something. And then he ordered a full investigation to be done.
Yeah, that's it. And again, it was obviously that chap came and stirred up the trouble. But again, the Privy Council, because they didn't really approve of Catherine, couldn't wait to put the daggers in the back again, the knives in the back, like they're done with all the other queens. Anybody who got close to Henry, they just eventually wanted to get rid of if they felt that they were a threat, didn't they? And
I was going to ask you that. Do you think I think they liked any of his wives?
No, they would be a threat in some way.
You actually just answered the question I was going to ask you. Do you think it was just sheer jealousy and fear that, because we know Anne Boleyn had a lot of influence over Henry,
Yeah, she did.
Jane Seymour had a certain amount of input, kind of thing. This was one of the main reasons that they got rid of Anne Boleyn.
Yeah.
Because Henry was starting to listen more to Anne than they were to them, basically. So she has to go. Anne of Cleves, I don't think she made much of an impact.
Ironically, she really did after her and Henry got annulled, because she was a really good advisor to Henry. They became very good friends, and he treated her as a sister. He said, "I'm going to refer to you as my sister," and they really did become very good friends and very good confidants. So although at the time the marriage wasn't a success and he found her very dull, when he got to know her, I think he realized what a lovely person she was and how bright and intelligent she was. And she gave him a lot of support and a lot of counsel when he felt quite down and quite lonely. I think he did turn to her in the end. He did turn to Anne of Cleves, for support. They became a lot closer. And as we said before...
corrected. Well, I did say at the start that we are not experts,
Yeah, we're not. Absolutely, we're not. But obviously, we've done a little bit of research. But yeah, Anne of Cleves, we did talk. It'd be interesting if for anybody watching who is interested in the previous ones, because if you go back and listen to the talk about Anne of Cleves, ironically, her and Henry really despised each other, didn't they? And they were only married and then they asked for an annulment. But after the annulment was when Henry really warmed to Anne. And they became really, really good friends. And as we know, he looked after her. She was the richest ex-queen there was. He gave her lots of riches. And she was very forthright in pushing Catherine Howard towards him, because she thought she would be good for Henry to lift his spirits and to make him happy. She felt that that's what Henry needed. He needed somebody around him who was light-hearted and fun. And by her own admission, Anne knew that she was a bit sort of stark and a bit serious. So that was why she was very pro pushing Catherine Howard towards Henry. And Henry found her just a joy because, as I say, he'd lost... Jane Seymour was the one that he was really bereaved after losing. She died after childbirth. Anne of Cleves, we know, didn't work out because they weren't attracted to each other. There was no chemistry to begin with. And so this beautiful young girl came along, and Anne of Cleves really, really backed it. And she was she was even said to go to the coronation of Catherine Howard. She was invited to court. Even when Henry and Anne were divorced, she was still invited to court and invited to important events. And Henry used to consult her on lots of things because she was very bright and very sort of politically savvy as well. So...
See, I think that shows I mean, obviously we know after the jousting accidents, Henry became a totally different man.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. Yeah.
The stories say he was, quite brutal and everybody feared him, and
Yeah.
A lot of people ended up in the scaffold. It was like walking in eggshells in court every day. But the way it was with Anne after the annulments, you're saying, that kind of shows you that he still had that human side. He still needed, even though he was the king, and he was the king for many years, he still needed somebody to guide him.
Yeah.
And I think it also shows just his total lack of trust in the Privy Council.
Yeah. Yeah.
That he would rely on this woman more than them.
I know, it was ironic, wasn't it? We think he was the most powerful man in the country, and yet there was a very naive side to him as well. Because a lot of all of the things that went on, all the nasty things that went on, like all of the sort of the boiling that we talked about and the burning and the beheading, a lot of that wasn't carried out by him. It was just what happened back then, and he gave the orders for it, but it was kind of his men that put those people in his path. And a lot of people died because of Henry, but what I'm saying is he was quite naive, wasn't he? Because a lot of them were false accusations, and he kind of went along with it. So that was a naivety. That was the naive side to him.
He was led down many a path, I mean, as you say, the brutality back then. I mean, the sentence for poisoning was boiling. Treason was beheading, high treason was hung, drawn, and quartered.
Yeah, absolutely awful.
They don't mess about, but then you get the guy who's the head of the country, basically, and he's still lacking that confidence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think maybe he did have the confidence, but then after he'd been slapped so many times, failed marriages, miscarriages, etc., death of Jane Seymour, that his confidence just went?
Yeah, his confidence went, and I also don't think he had anybody that he could truly trust. Apart from, ironically, Anne of Cleves, the other people around him, I think he began to realise that he couldn't trust them because he'd already beheaded a couple of them. Let's face it, hadn't he, of his close Privy Council? Thomas Cromwell being one of them, and Thomas More way beyond that, before that. So he'd already started to lose people that he had trusted, and then I think he started to doubt everybody. And became a bit paranoid, didn't he? We're talking about him having this change of personality, and he did become very paranoid. It was a split personality because he could be very loving and very kind to his queens, but then there was this other side to him that was really quite brutal and quite harsh, and he could turn on a dime, couldn't he, and make a decision. You think?
Well, he did. I mean, even though Jane Seymour was the love of his life, he even threatened her. He told her, to remember her place, basically.
Yeah.
And what could happen, and to remember what happened to his previous wife. So there's still, even though he loved her, there was still that bit in him that says, don't push me.
I'm the king. I have the power. There was still that side to him, definitely. So it was a bit of a split personality. And I think he became more so, obviously, as we said, when he got older. He'd had the riding accident, he had a head injury, he had the leg injury, and all of that really must have changed his personality a lot because he would have been in so much pain, and they didn't have the medicine that we have now. It was, that was quite sort of crude, the kind of things they used to do to bleed people.
The bleeding and the leeches and stuff. So I mean, so you've got him, he's had failed marriages, and then obviously Catherine, how he's married to her, but then the letter arrives, saying that something's going on here, and it was Thomas Cranmer that ordered to investigate. And you imagine what was going through Henry's mind, thinking, no, another one.
I know.
Even though I think he knew Anne Boleyn was innocent.
Yeah. Yeah.
She'd been accused of adultery with X amount of men and stuff. So he's probably sitting there thinking, no again. And Culpepper himself, I think he was a bit of a ladies' man. You know, he thought he could be, because he was kind of very close to the king.
Yeah.
I think he was his chief groom or whatever you call it, head groom.
Yeah.
And so he's probably, to him, it would have been a game.
Yeah, that's it. That's what, because even he would have been young. That's what I mean. I don't think they realised they were playing with fire. You know, Culpepper probably felt he was invincible. And Catherine Howard would have just been totally naive and not realising, even though she would have known what happened to his previous wives, she probably thought, oh, that will never happen to me, you know, because she was so naive. So it was incredibly tragic, again, with how the marriage ended, with her downfall. But before she was beheaded, what we mustn't forget is that Henry Mannix, Francis Derham and Thomas Culpepper were all also done for treason, basically, in adultery, weren't they? Well, adultery was high treason. And they were killed in quite brutal ways. And their heads were left on posts so that when poor Catherine was going to her beheading, she saw the heads on posts, which must have been quite horrifying, mustn't it? Mm-hmm. And I think it was Thomas Culpepper, or no, it was Francis Derham, wasn't it, that died the worst and most painful death. I think they...
You see, I think that
was just awful.
When you think, because Henry commuted Culpepper, they were originally to be hung, drawn and quartered, but then Henry commuted Culpepper sentenced to beheading. But he wanted Derham to suffer. Yeah. But when you think about the whole kind of affair between Culpepper and Catherine, Lady Rochford was majorly involved, you know, she set up meetings and stuff like that, you know, so... But Derham's involvement in it, I don't think he had any direct involvement in setting up meetings. He started the rumours.
Yeah.
You know, and he'd already had, you know, relationships with Catherine when she was younger, years and years ago, before she came to court.
Yeah.
But Henry seemed to have this vendetta against him more than Culpepper.
Yeah, because he had her a while ago and she was even younger than when Henry had her, so I think he felt that something had been stolen from him, her innocence had been stolen from him, so he really wanted, you know, to go after Derham, didn't he?
Rather than the guy who'd actually been sleeping with his wife.
Ironically,
it's the guy that never slept with her, you know, in that time frame.
I know.
It was. And then, of course, you get Lady Rochford. You know, I said that, I mean, there's so many stories. You know, I said that she went insane while she was being held prisoner. And it was argued to Henry that he could not execute an insane woman or insane person. And so Henry, this is his story, you know, we don't know it 100%. Henry had Parliament pass a bill saying that an insane person could be executed for treason. And that was just so he could get rid of Lady Rochford.
I know, and that was so sad, wasn't it, really? I mean, she did have a big part to play, but again, I think she was just caught up in all of the politics and everything of it, wasn't it? And she had quite a sad life when you think about it. People might have thought, oh, yes, she's quite privileged because she was in court. She was a lady in waiting for many years, but actually she'd had quite a sad life. And you think of all of the things that she'd witnessed in court, the queens that had come and gone. You know, it makes you wonder how safe she felt and how slightly mad she was already going before she was encouraging Catherine Howard to have these affairs, or this affair, should I say, with Thomas Culpepper.
See, that's a question that I've got in my head. You know, obviously, you know, she'd seen her husband executed for treason. You know.
Yeah.
And so she would have known what she was doing was treason.
Yeah.
So, do you think she was maybe pushed into doing it? Because Catherine, after all, was the queen consort, whatever her title was. Do you think she was maybe pushed into setting up these meetings?
Well, we'll never truly know. Was she pushed up into setting these meetings up? Or did she set them up because she wanted to see the downfall of Catherine? Was she good friends with Catherine? We'll never truly know. We'll never truly know. We only know by handed down accounts, don't we? We'll never truly know what was behind it. Was she already going slightly insane, so she didn't really realise the implications of what she was assisting Catherine in doing? You know, we just won't know, will we?
That is possible. You know, she already started to become mentally ill, and so maybe in her mind she wasn't doing anything wrong. I think Culpeper was surprised when he was caught, when he was arrested. You know, I don't think he ever expected to get caught.
Because they used
Catherine
to
as well.
They used to meet in secret. They never thought anybody would know what was going on. But there were spies everywhere. People were willing to, grasp on people and tell on people, weren't they, to sort of get themselves closer to the king. So it was a very sort of poisonous environment, wasn't it? A very dangerous environment, very poisonous environment, and incredibly sad and tragic with what happened to people that were so close to Henry VIII at one stage or another.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these poor young men lost their lives in a tragic way. Catherine Howard lost her life in a tragic way. Lady Rochester did as well. And as I say, they were executed on the 13th of Feb, 1542 at the Tower of London. And Catherine Howard is buried in the Chapel of St. Peter in the Tower of London. And you probably know a little bit more about the haunting, actually, Scott, don't you? Because she's said to haunt a certain area.
She's buried in the chapel within the Tower grave. I've been there. Her grave.
Have you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anne Boleyn's as well. I've been there 2-3 times. I've been out of the chapel. It's quite surreal when you're standing there, because they've got the tile floor, the mosaic floor kind of thing, and the inscriptions are there, you know. And you see, Anne Boleyn, when you think that they're actually later. I think George Boleyn's there as well.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that, but I think George Boleyn's buried there as well.
Yeah.
So the haunting, she is known that after her arrest, she managed to break free from her guards.
Right.
Henry was in the chapel at that time at prayers. And she broke free from her guards and ran down what's called the Great Gallery. It's called the Haunted Gallery as well. Obviously, screaming, trying to get to the king, but the guards caught her first and dragged her back to her chambers. And there's loads of reports that people have heard screaming in that particular place. I've been in the gallery myself, and I don't know whether it's, I've seen this in a few shows where you get in a place and you know the history, you know its reputation, your mind starts to maybe take over a wee bit. So I've been in the gallery. It's an amazing, if you ever get a chance to go and visit, it's just, you can't describe the feeling knowing that this is where Henry VIII walked, this is where Catherine Howard ran away for her guy. This is where these big events took place.
Ironically, I've been to Hampton Court Palace, but I was so young when I went there that I don't really remember much about it. You don't, when you're young, you're not interested in history, are you? Like you are when you're older. So I didn't really appreciate it at the time. So I definitely need to go back there and retrace the steps. You're
not that far from it. You're in Oxford, aren't you?
Yeah, 70 miles.
You're just along the road.
Yeah, I know. It's not far. Not far at all.
Get to it, Missy. Get to Andrew. But no, you're standing in the gallery and that, and you think, this is where Catherine Howard, she ran down here.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it?
Henry was amazing. Even in the hall as well, where Henry used to hold all his banquets and meetings and stuff, and you're standing in the same hall that it all happened in. That he sat with Anne Boleyn, that he sat with Catherine Howard, all his brides, they sat down the bottom at the big table at one point, and you're standing there, looking at it. You really need to go and see it. But no, she said two screams have been heard, and there's dozens of reports, so it's not just one or two.
Yeah.
She just reliving that moment.
Yeah, which is really sad, isn't it, if that is the case? That is.
I think at that time, right at that moment when she broke free, I think that's when the penny would finally dropped.
Yeah.
Because obviously she's arrested. So she's in a kind of state, why am I being arrested kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then it hits home exactly how much
crap she's actually in.
I know.
Because she said to Zion, Abia, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but she said to the Abia Zion, she was removed from her apartments. And I think after that, she accepts her fate. You know, because it said that she became very quiet, very withdrawn. Just in shock, basically.
I think after, you know, when she's sent there, then she realises there's nothing she can do.
Yeah.
She's still terrified.
Terrible.
You know, but she knows where she's going, whereas when she breaks free for her guards, that's when the brick really hits home.
Yeah.
You know, oh my God, what have I done?
So terrible.
I need to, you know, and it's her last ditch attempt to reach. I think it's as close as she ever came to Henry after her arrest.
Yeah.
Was on that day, because he was at the end of the gallery and she was. So I think she thought, I'm jumping on this chance.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, she was caught. You know.
I know.
Tragic. So she was executed in 1542. Right?
Yeah.
And she was roughly, as far as we know, she was roughly around about 18.
Yeah, 18 or 19. So young. So tragic. You know, another one that's really tragic. But Henry wasn't on his own for long, because we know
he didn't hang about, did he?
We know our dear old Henry by now, always in pursuit of another wife. So along comes another beautiful lady called Catherine. And Catherine Parr, who was his last wife, she was a powerful, she came from a powerful English family. Her father was Sir Thomas Parr, and he was a knight. Her mother was Maud Green. So Maud was a lady in waiting to Catherine of Aragon. So we're going right back to Henry's first wife there. So there was a connection to this family going sort of way back. She again was said to be born approximately in 1512. We're not sure of exact dates. Now, Catherine Parr was said to be the most intelligent of all of Henry's wives. She was very privileged. She was intelligent. She was a humanist. She spoke several languages, including Latin and French. And when she was with Henry, I think she held back a lot because she knew what had happened to his previous wives. So we'll just talk a little bit about what she was like. So again, Hans Holbein Jr. painted a miniature portrait showing a very composed and dignified lady who was Catherine Parr. She was very attractive. She was very pleasant. Her character was said to be very calm. She was a real religious influencer. I've got your problem now.
She was a what? Sorry, what was that? Sorry.
She was very religiously influential. There we go. Let's put it that way. She was intelligent and she was graceful. This is how people described her. And she had several marriages, which we'll talk about in a moment. But when she was married to Baron Latimer, this is when Henry noticed her. So, but we'll come back to that in a moment. But she caught Henry's eye. And the sad thing is about Catherine that going back in her earlier life, she had met Thomas Seymour, who was one of the brothers of Jane Seymour.
Mm-hmm.
And they always loved each other and they wanted to be together. And when her husband died, she was hoping that that would happen. But I'll talk about that in a minute because we'll talk about her marriages. So her first marriage was to Edward Burr. She was only 17 and he died, leaving her a widow very young. So that was marriage number one for her, for Catherine. Her second marriage was to John Neville, who was this baron. So he was the third Baron Latimer. So she became Lady Latimer. He was quite a lot older than her. So again, she probably didn't really love him. It was probably one of these marriages of convenience that her family pushed her towards. She looked after his estate, she looked after his children, and she nursed him because he was quite sickly. And Henry VIII met Catherine Parr, or Lady Latimer as she was known, before Baron Latimer died. And she'd really caught his eye because she was very elegant, very sophisticated, a really lovely lady. And Lord Latimer, Baron Latimer, then died. So, of course, Henry set his sights on her and really started to court her. And she had to go along with it again because he was the king. whatever King Henry VIII wanted, he would get, as we know. And she was really nervous about this and really anxious about this because she, again, couldn't marry her true love, who was Thomas Seymour. So she ended up being courted by Henry. He showered her in gifts. He showered her in jewels. He really was attracted to her for not only her calm and her grace, but for her knowledge and her wisdom, because, again, she was very, very intelligent, and she was very politically wise and very religiously wise as well. And so going on a little bit, obviously Henry decides that he wants to make her wife number 6. Now, she was only 31 at the time. Henry was in his 50s by this time. But in 1943, they got married. So she became queen consort. And she was also made regent when Henry went off to France to the war to fight and, to lead his army. She was so powerful and so highly thought of by Henry that he made her regent. Mm-hmm. Now, this immediately upset a lot of the Privy Council. Surprise, surprise, here we go again. Here we go again. So she made a lot of enemies at court just by being her beautiful, intelligent self. And not, basically the Privy Council were very anti the fact that he'd left a woman in charge above them, and what she said went because she was made regent. So Henry was in France. All of these jealousies started to arise. The rumours started. When Henry came back, the Privy Council were whispering in his ear, she's got all of these political ideas. She's got all of these religious ideas. And he started to doubt Catherine. And she was very loving and she was very kind towards Henry. She would nurse him, especially when he was ill, when he had his leg, when he was poorly. But he started to doubt. We said he was paranoid. He didn't have the trust of anybody. And now his beloved and dear Catherine was now being talked about. And he was thinking, oh, my goodness, not again. Here we go again. So much so that Henry even drew up papers for her arrest. And her and Henry were allegedly sitting in the garden talking, and the guards came up. And she looked at Henry and she said, what's going on? And the guard said, we've come to arrest you. We've come to take you to the Tower. And Henry sort of ushered them away. I think he changed his mind at the last minute, and she sort of managed to talk her way out of it. She said, Henry, I'm only here to love you and look after you and nurse you and be kind to you. I'm not here to, to preach to you and to talk down to you, because that's what the Privy Council have been saying, that she got all of these political views, all of these religious views, and she was preaching to people. And this is what Henry had been told. So he was so convinced. But at the last minute, he realised that he didn't want to lose his companion, who had been nothing but kind and loving to him. So he changed his mind. She managed to navigate her way out of it because she was very, very clever, very intellectual. So she knew the right things to say to save herself, basically. Mm-hmm. So they ended up where they were obviously still married. Then Henry became more and more sick, more and more ill. And as we know, when Henry died, Catherine actually survived him. So I don't know if you want to say anything more about Catherine before I go on to after that, because I've got a little bit of information after that. But I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about Catherine and her relationship with Henry and what you think about it.
She was a very, very well-educated woman, but to me, she was, I don't want to say boring. She wasn't boring. She was maybe, in my opinion, maybe one of the least significant wives, story-wise.
Okay, that's interesting that you say that.
Because I mean, Catherine the Arrogant, we all know this, that was a big marriage for Henry. Mm-hmm. 21, 22 years or something they were married for. Then Anne Boleyn, controversy, execution, turns out she was innocent. Jane Seymour gives him his only son. Then sadly she passes away. Anne of Cleves, at first they don't go on, but then this strong bond develops. Then again, we just talk about Catherine Howard, young, naive girl becomes queen, is executed about 18 months later because she was having an affair. Then you get Catherine Parr, who seemed to be the most peaceful of them. That makes sense. I know what I mean up here.
She was very peaceful. She was very calm. I think she knew how to play the role, because she did have her own views and she did read books that she shouldn't have read in private. They were hidden away. However, she did actually write her own book, which was called Lamentations of a Sinner. And she was the first queen to have a book actually in her own name. She wrote several books, but this was the one that she was particularly proud of. So she was also very instrumental in the education of young Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, who became Elizabeth I, and also Edward VI, both of Henry's children. She was very forthright in making sure that they were very well educated. And if you think how successful Elizabeth I came to be, then maybe we've got a lot to thank Catherine Parr for, because she was instrumental in her education and pushing her to be the best she could be.
Yeah, I'm just going to say quite hi to Ashley and Howard, the two girls who were on last night.
Oh, okay.
Go and give them a check out, folks. Ashley and Howard for last night. They will be seeing them again. But go and give them a wee look up. Very bubbly ladies, very nice. Same as yourself, though. I mean, she was did she not at one point try and reconcile Henry with Mary and Elizabeth?
She did.
Bring them back.
She definitely had. She got on very well with Elizabeth and very well with Edward, Henry's two younger children. She had more of a tricky situation with Mary, because Mary had formed good relationships with previous queens, not Catherine Howard, the young Catherine Howard as we know. And I think she was a little bit reserved with Catherine Parr because she didn't know Catherine's intentions. And their religious beliefs were very different as well. So that caused a little bit of friction, to say the least. So I don't believe that Mary had that much to do with Catherine Parr, but the two younger children, Elizabeth I, Edward VI, definitely did. And she was instrumental in pushing them forward so that they, did the best that they could do with their education and everything.
I mean, Mary, I know we're going to talk about her on a future show, but I'm not just to say she was evil. But I think Mary was more vicious and bitter.
She was, because
than Elizabeth and
she was.
Edward was. All right, Elizabeth had a raw deal. Her mum was executed when she was very, very young, etc. But I think Mary was very, very bitter. So with her, what happened to her mum, and then the whole
Catherine of Aragon. Yeah, absolutely. And why wouldn't she be? What happened to Catherine of Aragon changed the faith in England. They broke away from, well, more than that, they broke away from the church, the Roman Catholic Church, didn't they? And so Mary always still was a Catholic through and through. And she resented the fact that younger children were more likely to take the crown than she was, which we know didn't happen. She did eventually take the crown, but we'll go on to that in another one. But so yeah, she was quite a hard character, Mary. She was quite a hard character. It was only a few people that she let get very close to her. And I don't feel that Catherine Parr was one of them. I don't feel that there was a lot of trust or a lot of respect there, personally.
No, I don't think there was, because I mean, she's had all this bitterness pent up for years. Because I think Mary,
absolutely,
was maybe in her 30s, approaching her 30s. I might be wrong when Catherine eventually came on the scene. So Mary's not a daft wee girl. She's been there. She's been through a lot. Her own father even threatened to execute her if she never signed the oath. And then he did a U-turn with that. So, I mean, you've got that going off as well. And it's all up here. Then all of a sudden, Catherine Parr's on the scene. She's trying, you should maybe talk to your dad, basically, because as I think we seen the previous show, take all the royal titles away for them. At the end of the day, they were father and daughter.
Yeah.
And
Mary had a hard time. She really did, when you think about it. It was sad, very sad for her. She lost her mother and she lost her father, really, didn't she? Very young, because it was quite a while until she was invited back to court. But if we go on to talk about Catherine, so once Henry had died, I don't know what period of time it was. However, her fourth marriage was finally to her true love, Thomas Seymour. She finally got to marry her true love, and Thomas got to marry his true love as well. But this was so tragic and so sad as well, because Catherine died on the 5th of September 1948, aged 36.
1948. She was a good old age, wasn't she?
1548, bless you. 1548, age 36, from complications in childbirth, a year after Henry's death. So how sad is this? She marries her true love.
And she survived the war.
She was pregnant. They were expecting their child. She gives birth, and soon after she dies. And she's only 36. After all of these marriages, she marries her true love, and then she dies sadly. But Thomas Seymour, he was having lived such a life in court, and his family being very important. He, sadly, this is where the tragedy continues. Thomas Seymour was implicated for a plot against the crown, and he was executed. This was after Catherine Parr had died, but even so, how tragic. Leaving their daughter, who was Mary Seymour, she became an orphan, basically as a toddler, and she was looked after by one of Catherine's friends, but records suddenly stop. So they don't know whether she died young or whether she just disappeared into obscurity, but there is no other record from when she was a very young orphan. And this is Thomas Seymour and Catherine Parr's daughter. So how sad is that? And Catherine is buried at the Chapel of St Mary, Sudeley Castle, which was a place that she lived and she loved. And I don't know if you know Scott, but she was said to haunt the gardens and the chapel there. So there is still a ghost that is seen there on very rare occasions, but it's always in the chapel or the garden of Sudeley Castle. So I mean, what a tragic life for all of the wives, whether they were killed or not. It didn't go on to be the fairy tale ending, did it? It's just so sad.
I've been fascinated with the Tudor era for, I don't know, donkey's years, you know.
Me too, yeah.
Since 1948. I'm not going to let you live that one down, Tracey.
I'm glad you corrected me, because I wouldn't have known I said that.
It took me a couple of seconds to click. Did she say 48? And I mean, I've been fascinated for many, many a year. Because it was so bloody and there was so much happening. All right, you know, other monarchs during their reigns have been controversy and all the usual, you know, the normal bits. Yeah. But it just seemed with Henry, he never got a good deal with any of his wives.
And they certainly didn't get a good deal, did they? Let's face it.
And none of them got a good deal. I'd say he got the best one. I'd say he got the best deal with Catherine of Aragon, because they were married so long, you know. And obviously Catherine was the girl of Arthur's widow originally. Yeah. But he just never, ever, he never lived the fairy tale.
No, none of them did. How sad is this?
Not one of them.
We're talking about the Royal Court of England that we know so much about. Henry VIII, all his wives, all of his privy council. We seem to know all of their personalities because that history has been kept alive by so much fascination by people before us and us now, people after us. I'm sure that history and the fascination with that era will keep going forever. But how sad is it when you think about it? There is no happy endings for any of them.
Not one of them. 6 wives. You know, husband, and not one of them.
And Henry didn't have a nice life. When you think about it, he didn't have a nice life. He might have been privileged and had all of the riches of the kingdom, but he didn't have anybody that he could trust. He got through 6 wives because, you know, for the reasons we've been through in various talks. He was separated from his children. His only heir that he ever wanted was a boy, and his boy died at the age of 15. So he had a very short reign. So the whole thing was filled with tragedy. The only positive is obviously Mary reigned, and she was known as Bloody Mary because she was quite brutal then against the Protestants.
She went to town on them.
Yeah, she certainly did. But then Elizabeth I reigned. So it was a fairy tale for her because she had a very long reign and she was a very popular queen. She had a long life and a long reign, and you know, it was the golden age, wasn't it? So I guess that's the fairy tale. So if we can take that positive from Henry VIII's era, it was his daughter Elizabeth that kind of lived out of I wouldn't say it was exactly a rosy fairy tale, but, you know, there wasn't too much tragedy then, was there?
And let's not forget, you know, Lady Jane Grey.
Yeah, I know. That was George VI's advisors wanted Lady Jane Grey to be queen, so that to stop Mary from becoming queen. So she was used as a pawn. She was very young, and as we know, she only lasted for 9 days, was it?
She was queen for 9 days, and then she was executed. And then,
and that was all political to try and keep Mary away from the throne. And obviously, she was beheaded. Mary then did become queen. So it was another waste of a young life, wasn't it? Which is incredibly sad.
And when you think it, I mean, this might sound dapper, you think of the deal that they all had, you know. No wonder some of them are still sent to Rome to this day.
I know. How can they rest when they have that sort of life? So,
you know, I mean, Anne Boleyn, you know, Anne Boleyn, she said to haunt about 7 different places.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. You know, I spoke to Mark Egerton about this, you know, and I said to him, well, why was she haunt, you know, numerous locations? And we came with the theory that these places are haunted by a lady, you know, but because these places have connections to Anne Boleyn, people
assume it's Anne Boleyn.
Just jump on, no, that's Anne Boleyn. I think if Anne is anywhere, she'll be at Hever Castle. I mean, she said to haunt the Tower of London. Why would you want to haunt the place you'd been executed?
Yeah, I think that you would go to the place that you love. You might, maybe it's that kind of stone tape theory. There's so many different hauntings, which is a whole nother show, isn't it? Where, you know, there was such emotion and tragedy that kind of spirit energy is trapped in that building. But I think for a spirit to come back, they would come back to a place that they loved, and Hever Castle absolutely would be for Anne, as Sudeley Castle would be for Catherine Parr. You know, you would go to a place that you loved, that you grew up, where you have lovely memories. Of course you would. So,
and as we said before, the only one that's not been reported, have been seen or whatever, is Anna Cleves.
Yeah, well, she lived out a very rich
she got a good deal.
Life.
You know, so we said none of them, you know, got a good deal, but Anna Cleves, she
did
really
actually. She
hit the money.
She outlived all of them. She outlived Catherine.
In a manner, you know, she literally hit the money. So she really no reason to come back and you know want anywhere or say hello.
Yeah, she had quite a fairy tale in a way. She wouldn't have wanted to come across from Germany to marry a king of England that she didn't know. So that wasn't a fairy tale to start with, but it certainly was afterwards, because she was thought very highly of by Henry VIII. And as we say, she was left the riches, the land, the property. She was the most rich of all of the ex-queens.
Do you think, you know, one last question before we wind up, do you think that if Catherine Howard hadn't come on the scene, that maybe Henry would have remarried Anna Cleves? Because there were stories that they did eventually become intimate.
No, that's quite possible, because as I say, they became really close and really good friends after the marriage was annulled. And I think Henry was just in one of those obstinate moods. You know, she wasn't very attractive to him. She wasn't who he thought she was going to be. And it was an instant, no, not interested, don't want to marry her, had to go along with it for political reasons. But then, no, you know, I need to divorce her, annul her. I'm not going to behead her, because I need to keep those good political relations with Germany.
Because he would have lost it quite a lot.
But having said that, later on, when he got to know Anne, they used to play cards together. He used to confide in her. They really did become good friends. And there's a good chance that perhaps he did regret, you know, because she wasn't going to produce an heir. He'd already got 3 children. You know, I think he'd given up hope of having another male heir. And maybe you're right. Maybe if Catherine Howard hadn't have come along, it could have been different. Perhaps he would have still gone back to Anne of Cleves. Who knows? It's an interesting theory, isn't it? But what an interesting era that you could talk about and never get bored of it. Could you? We probably bored everybody that's listening, but me and you would never get bored of it.
No, you don't get bored, and as we say, there's still quite a bit to come, folks. We're going to wind it up there, but always I'll keep a hold of you, Tracey. But so that concludes Henry VIII and his wives. I think maybe we should do our next show should be about the death of Henry.
Yeah,
we've spoke about, you know, his life and stuff like that, him being king and his wives and how they met their end in different ways. I think we should do one about when Henry died and what impact it had on the whole shooting match, basically.
Yeah, that would be an interesting one, actually. I think we did cover it briefly when we talked about Henry in the first one, didn't we? But yeah, the impact it had afterwards would be quite interesting. So yeah, we can certainly do that.
I think the impact would have been quite major considering the history. You know, and a lot of people that were affected, including the Privy Council as well. You know, whoever was left kicking about. I think Brandon, he was still kicking about at the time.
Absolutely. He was a very good friend to Henry, wasn't he?
They grew up together.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Also, his sister, Margaret.
Yeah, they married in secret.
You know, so, you know, it's surprising that she never figured very much in it. She was always there in the background.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, well, that was...
my crown is getting a bit heavy.
Is it? Mine's isn't. Mine's is fine. Mine's is taped on. So we'll wind up there. I'll keep a hold of you, dear. Where can people find you?
So, Tracey, you'll find me on Facebook. You'll find me in Scott's list, Scott's friends list. If you're interested in anything I do, yes, I have a passion about the Tudors, but a lot of people who know me will know that I'm psychic medium. I do tarot card readings, and I'm really excited to say that I am now a past life regression therapist, which I am loving. So if you're interested in past lives, reincarnations, or even if you have issues in this life that you want to go back to and address and go through some sort of healing, I can do all of that with you. So don't hesitate to get in touch. But you can find me, Tarot Tracey, on Facebook and through Scott's list. I'll be on his friends list. So just that's quickly, me, Michelle.
So go and give her a look, but just quickly, just before we sign off, just what you say there, she's with past life. That's what Debbie Ison does. Debbie's a regular with me as well.
Yeah.
I think I'll get you two on a show.
Okay.
To compare views or techniques, or you know, I don't know what the hell you might call it.
We all work differently. Absolutely, we all work differently. So it's quite.
Leave that with me. You just gave me another idea. Not me. But we're going to sign off, folks. So that's it for this week for us. And you'll be able to find Tracey where she says. Yeah. You can find her. So thanks everybody for watching. I can get rid of this tape.
My neck's aching where I've sat still.
I know. Let's see. Look. I'll show you what was I'll show you what was holding on. That's what was holding on at the back.
Oh my word! Well, it worked, didn't it?
It did. It worked. All right. So we're away this time. All right, folks. Just time's getting on.
All. Take care.
So talk to you soon and take care, folks. All right. Cheers. Bye. Bye.
Night.